Joining us right now in our studio is Perry Kinkaide. Perry, you're the conference chair. Let's start first off with just a little bit of an overview about the conference.
Well, the conference, as appropriately titled Analytics, Big Data in the Cloud, is to try and demystify what for some is popularized in Hollywood with Moneyball, or they've watched the Jeopardy show and seen Watson, IBM, win that show. We ran a conference 2 years ago called Offloading Intelligence When Machines Decide, and it was all about artificial intelligence, which is what the Alberta Council of Technologies does, is we try and expose to the community, to the public in general, science and technology that they, in a way that they would understand and find interesting. Do conferences of this nature to try and find suppliers that can talk English about technologies.
Well, and that's one of the things I found with one of your keynote speakers already, is that he simplifies it, which makes it so easy to understand. Is that part of the problems with the industry right now and things growing so fast? Is it it's just difficult for the average person to wrap their head around it?
The professions have notoriously over the years kept much of their science and technology in mystery. I mean, it's part of business, is only we can understand, and you as a client, one step above a slave, are beholden to us. The rate at which technology is entering into society today is transforming the relationship between the professional and the client. Client becomes a consumer, and as a consumer, you want them to have informed consent as an informed shopper. So in many ways, what we are trying to do is help inform the consumer about what they will be buying. Now, we could be talking about stem cells, we could be talking about fusion energy, we could be talking about analytics. Those are the types of things that we do, is looking at technologies that could be disruptive, where in a democracy you want informed consent of the citizens. And so that's really what our organization is all about.
Difficult to get your point across, or the explanations across?
I think the difficult thing is finding getting your theater built. You want to find actors or presenters that are professional, of course, but you want people who can really relate very well to people. There's a phrase that's emerged over the last couple of years, and I tried it first in Oregon. It was coming out of a review of our fusion energy work in California. And I knew that in a very brief period of time, I needed to establish a link with the Technology Transfer Office in Oregon. And I knew exactly what their dilemma was, that there's a lot of knowledge on campus and thirsty consumers for that knowledge in community, but very little bridging going on. And so when I walked in the office, it just hit me. In a bright, sunny day, knowledge without relationships has no value. And that's what ABC Tech is all about, and conferences of this nature, is to try and build markets for this knowledge. And in order to do that, it's got to be understandable.
Right. One of the things is that things are happening so quickly. So I mean, you know, years ago, you used to joke because your parent had a VCR and it was always flashing the time because they never quite mastered that.
Yep.
It's gone well beyond that for today's generation.
Your keynote note used a word frequently called volatility. Volatility is becoming a real issue, and we've talked about the rate of change, and you know, throughout my career, people were talking about that word, that four-letter offensive word called busy. Busy has become a way of life. Well, it isn't going to get better. And one of the interesting things about analytics is it does provide some options, because with analytics, you have the capacity to get an aid in decision making and maybe even automate that decision. So if I'm a doctor, it takes some time today to process information about you, process the specimens, get my information back. Analytics has the potential to shorten that time. But with it, it also changes the nature of the relationship. And data does force a change in relationships.
Right. Is there a danger that you don't see the human anymore, the human side of things?
Well, I think it's actually the opposite. I think the data becomes secondary and the person becomes primary. And I think in a world where only the professional knew and the consumer was beholden to them, the consumer was always in a subsidiary position. I think increasingly the client come consumer, whether I'm in the world of accounting or in the world of education or in the world of healthcare, that the consumer becomes informed, and that now a relationship occurs. Now that isn't always positive. Sometimes the consumer assumes more, they know more than they do, and so the professional needs to be one aware that they're to some extent a teacher. And then they provide some guidance to the consumer about what they know and don't know.
It's fascinating because I look back to, I looked after my mom for a number of years, and Her generation was you never questioned a doctor.
Right.
You
Right.
never, whatever they said goes, and that was it.
Yeah.
Now, when I go to the doctor, I've got a list that my wife provides me, telling her, so I can tell the doctor what's wrong with me.
I think I think we've all met individuals who either abided by or articulated, "Take your medicine and shut up. Take your medicine, go home." And I don't mean just to pick on or to articulate just the health industry. I mean, the same is occurring in any knowledge-based profession. And the professions, by definition, are knowledge-based. Their ethic is "thou shalt do no harm." Well, the data shows whether or not they're doing harm. And one of the presentations today was readmissions to hospitals.
Right.
And what drives that and how that might be addressed and how analytics can help. Now, I don't think we want to just emphasize the health industry being affected. This is affecting trading in the finance industry. It's affecting the automation of driving in automobiles. It's affecting who actually moves vehicles in transportation. It's occurring in security and insurance asset protection. The magic of this conference is to show, from the oil and gas industry to education to health to how you govern in a democracy, analytics has the potential to change it all.
You mentioned the auto industry, and that's an area where obviously technology has moved ahead to a great degree. Now it seems when you go to get your car checked, the first thing they do is hook it up to a computer before they even check anything. And if the computer shows nothing, it's assumed that you've got nothing wrong.
Sure.
You know, is this something that we'd have to worry about in other sectors as well? Are we relying too much on the computer and the information it provides?
I think it does ask the question, what after knowledge? Machines in my dad's generation were for replacing muscle. Machines in the coming generation is to replace knowing. What is the next step? One of the sessions here on Singularity is forecasting and futurist, which many are wrestling with, particularly in a society where democracy is our way of life.
First up, before you go on with that, explain to us what Singularity is.
Singularity is a point in time where these technologies that we're referring to, whether it be nanotech or biotech or infotech, start to converge. And instead of just it being biotech, it's bio and information tech, so that information management and biology come together, or information management and bots in nano, which you breathe, do analysis of what's going on in your body. These things are not as far-fetched as we might think. So Singularity is wrestling with how will society be governed at a time when technology is knowing?
And how will it be governed?
It is either the ultimate in democracy, that you won't be voting on a semi-annual basis. You might be voting daily. Certainly Walmart looks at your votes every time you buy something, and they use that information to anticipate what you want to buy next. Amazon does the same thing. In a democracy, it might be utopian to think about the fact that the public sector may not be getting as much of your tax base, but the tax base that they get would be spent more efficiently and be spent for things that you really care about.
Now you are talking about the future and dreaming, aren't you?
Well, here's
a lot of people would argue that.
This is what's fascinating about what I think is evolving is data does enable you to customize your services. It says, I know a great deal about you, whether or not I'm a shopper or a voter. If I know a great deal about you, you can't get away with then sending me a public program and saying, we've now profiled you and we're going to give you a program. You have every right to say at that point in time, I am an individual and I want my services customized. Now, what happens to the word public at that time? Public has, for 2,000 years, meant we will develop a policy or program that fits the majority of you. I think what we're seeing with people carrying iPods and Blackberries, et cetera, that are in the know, they're impatient, they want customized service. And there's no reason why industries today can't be thinking that way.
When you talk about democracy, how does government change? Because it's slow at best when it comes to moving, unless the will is there to really make something happen and they've got the requisite number of seats to push stuff through. But I mean, to come up with new legislation for many things takes time. We're talking about stuff here that many people may not actually have a grasp on. How does government keep up with that?
Well, you touched on the word of rate and time and pace. It's conceivable that people are no longer beholden to this government that designs a new program, but government has the capability with public transfer funds to make your package fit you. We did talk about guaranteed incomes and things of that nature. I think we're going to see a whole rethink of the way government designs programs in the future and how it tests what the market is looking for, what the individuals are looking for. Today they've got your postal code. Tomorrow they'll have your data. They've got data today in health records, in education records, in tax records. If those, what's called open data, start to come together, there's enormous implications to improve the efficiency of government services. And government isn't just about service. Government is about policies and taxing and regulations. It will be a very different environment when we start merging these data sets. The whole idea of open data is under discussion today. The Prime Minister of Canada has asked the question, why are we doing census anymore when we have all the data that we have? We need an open data policy, and we've got to figure out how to do it without violating your personal space.
When you look at this, it seems as though there's lots of reasons to be optimistic because you can see the upside to this. Right. What's the downside?
Well, I think the downside is who is watching me? Do I have anything to hide? There have been sessions here today where people are asking whether or not we will provide the names of those that came to this event. In other words, we know something that everyone in the room doesn't know. We're reluctant to share that information without the permission from the individuals. So I think we're going to see a lot of discussion in the coming years about privacy. It's certainly underway today. So the downside is privacy itself is getting rethought and relooked at. There is a new generation today that has grown up with Facebook and Twitter that doesn't seem to be as apprehensive, and maybe they should be, or maybe they shouldn't. And in a democracy, that will be shaped by the people, not by the government.
It's interesting you mention that as to who has the information, because if you go back in time to, say, the 50s, the McCarthy era, you know, when that person decided you're a communist and anybody you speak to is a communist, whether they were or not, they made that designation. That would be something that I would think could be possible down the road, because right now, you and I sitting here talking may mean nothing, but down the road, they may look at you and say, hey, you were talking to Rob Hislop, so he's connected to you as well. So
this raises two very interesting questions, and one of them is who handles the data? If data is the new gold, if data is that valuable, but it is a commodity, it's gold in the analysis, you want to make sure ethical people are using this data. So the shopper for data, or the shopper himself, is going to be asking, what are you doing with this data? And is this ethical? One of the topics at the conference is to derive resolutions for helping develop the analytics industry in Alberta, and we'll be asking that very question. What should the policies look like for Alberta, and what input do people have in terms of shaping not just a policy, but what they personally want? Can you envision a world where instead of a policy on health records, you make the decision about whether your health record should be public or private, should be shared or otherwise?
And if you decide not to, then all of a sudden you're throwing a bit of a fly in the ointment, aren't you?
But maybe we should have certified data analysts. That's one of the ways to address this, is if data is going to be shared and is going to be in open, then maybe as we had with doctors and as we had with engineers and as we had with teachers, maybe data analysts should be certified.
So you and I have been through an era where data was protected and privacy was important, and now today, as you mentioned, with the younger generation, it doesn't seem to be as much of a concern to them as they pop everything up on the web, from opinions to pictures to whatever. Do you see this being a good shift?
It's hard to put good or bad on this. I mean, the reality is it's going to happen, and it's well underway. I think in a democracy, government acts second. Government doesn't lead. A healthy democracy is one that is monitoring all the time the status of the public, but it doesn't lead the public in a direction. It responds to what the public is seeking. With the amount of data that we've got, I think we've got means now to say you can't falsify. I mean, that's the positive. If data is really out there, I should be able to look at data and find out whether there's a lie being perpetrated or not. So that's the positive to avoid the McCarthyism, is I should be able to appeal, whether it be through a lawyer or some data legalistic profession that emerges in the coming years. I think we have the means of actually doing a better job in protecting privacy, of knowing who's violating. Exactly. So in the past, you could hide behind a lie, and if you couldn't counter it, you were vulnerable. So That's the utopian perspective. The other one is maybe government doesn't keep up as fast as it should, and there's some violations during this transition period. And I think that's what we're going to face in the next few years, is the change coming faster than the government can keep up. Conferences like this are to try and help people better understand their own responsibility in an environment of change and to build the structures that we will need for the future.
So when you look at a conference like this, the room is full, but it's not a huge room. How do you get the word out to more people and make them understand it?
One at a time. When the Alberta Council of Technology started, there were 5. And those 5 individuals were looking at emerging business opportunities. And before you knew it, there were 15. And what became apparent is it was really not a business advisory, it was becoming a business network. But even so, it was becoming a technology network. They were very interested in emerging technologies and what the business and personal ramifications would be. So business is wrapped around values. You don't run a business to violate your customer. You build a business to have a long-term relationship with that customer. So that group now is no longer 5 or 15, it's now 11,000. And when we survey that 11,000 as to why they are interested in the commercialization of emerging technologies, they say because they see emerging technologies as being a fundamental opportunity or threat. And so while ABC Tech uses technology as the hook, what we're really about is values. Our discussions and our dialogue and our conferences always talk about human values, governing mechanisms, the society. And so what we're trying to do is better manage the relationship between man and technology. You talk about going to buy an automobile today and wondering what you should have under the hood, but now they're starting to ask you, who do you want to drive it when it backs up out of the garage? Who do you want to park it? You know, you can see the trend well underway that Google today is mapping the world from an automobile. Tomorrow they'll be driving it.
I mean, it's a fascinating time. Would you say that this is a time of transition?
I think it is.
Yeah.
I think we've been in that transition for some time. The demarcation of change is, however, going to be the moment when the ICT industry, the information communications technology, which has been about computers and wires and fiber and wireless, when it changes from being about technology and becomes a service. And just for your viewers, to move from understanding how the wheel works to worrying about transportation is the transition. To worry about whether my computer has enough power and is properly connected to data. I think we're moving beyond that now, and we're talking about apps. So this conference is much less about what's under the hood. I couldn't tell you what 3G and 4G is. I don't even carry an iPod. I actually have a pen in my pocket.
Okay.
But the reality is we're moving from all that technology and the gadgets to not worrying about how the gadget works. When you first got a TV, you sat in front of it, mystified about how this thing works, and you spend all your brain power. I wonder how this works. Well, today you watch it. The computer is going to be part of your life as it is today, not about going to get information. It will be doing things for you that today you do for yourself.
So how do then people, I guess, not so much be at the forefront of it, but how do they ease their transition?
I could laugh and say, come to our conferences.
Well, but that's just it. And people who are watching, and this is something you're doing to get the word out as well.
Right. And I think we all as citizens, because this is not about an organization, even though I refer to it as Alberta Council of Technology. This is all of us as citizens wanting to be part of a change, but also don't want to lose control. We want to make sure that the transition process is orderly. We talk about technologies that could be disruptive. That's the issue. We want to make sure they're not disruptive. We want to make sure that the governing mechanisms and the informed consumers are part of this. In Alberta in particular, and I'm now going to zero in on a piece of geography, because in reality the world of analytics doesn't have borders. The data doesn't respect borders. It just looks at whatever someone wants to look at in that data. We think that Alberta is missing a huge opportunity. We've got carbon up the yin-yang. Wheat, meat, fiber, timber, oil and gas. We will be prosperous for a long while, we think. As long as our consumers want to buy raw product, we'll be in great shape. But, I mean, should fusion come along, there may be a transition in the way energy is generated or purchased. If stem cells come along, we may well have a completely different healthcare system we have today. So we're well aware that technologies can be disruptive. Someone needs to be thinking about how to anticipate that and make sure we make the proper adjustments.
Right, right. Well, thank you very much, Barry. I appreciate your time today. And the conference is fascinating. Coming up at 12:45 today, actually, it is 12:45. You've got a gentleman coming in from India.
Yes, Gautam is from Tata Consulting Services. Today's theme is global reach. The presenter this morning was the U.S., the presenter at lunch will be from India, and the presenter at dinner is from Israel.
All right.
And the message is, we're not alone.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're going to be back throughout these 3 days, of course, covering the conference for you with both live and taped segments. Again, you can catch us at fuselogic.tv, abctech.ca, and bestofanalytics.com.